With last week's explosive start, the team decides to dial it back a bit, with Sam playing a tapped Foreboding Ruins, John playing a tapped Hallowed Fountain, Tom playing a tapped Undercity Sewer, using its effect to surveil a card to the graveyard, and Extra rounding out the turn with a tapped Rootbound Crag. Sam starts off our second round with another tapped land, this time being a shadowy backstreet, surveilling the card to his graveyard. John simply plays a Great Furnace and passes, while Tom gives everyone a flashback of last week's events with his Forest into Soul Ring, followed by 1,000-Year Elixir. He then passes the turn. Extra plays a Bountiful Promenade and casts Sanctum Weaver, before passing the turn to Sam. Sam plays a Battlefield Forge, then casts his commander, Mr. House, President and CEO, losing 1 life to the Forge. He passes. John plays a Storm-Carved Coast and casts Synth Eradicator, which he uses to attack Tom, triggering Eradicator's effect to exile the top card and gain 2 energy. Tom takes the damage, and the turn passes to him. Tom plays a Tainted Isle and casts his commander, the Master Transcendent, giving Sam 2 rad counters when it enters. He then passes the turn. Extra plays a Carplusian Forest, then enchants it with Trace of Abundance. He then casts a Mesa Enchantress and lets the turn go to Sam. Sam first triggers Radiation, milling 2 cards, losing 1 life and a rad counter. He then plays a Sulphurous Springs and casts Luck Bobblehead. On his end step, Tom activates Master on the milled Ojurta Deepest Foundation, putting it into play as a 3/3. John plays a Battlefield Forge, then casts Aetherworks Marvel. He then attacks Extra with Eradicator, triggering its effect again to exile the top card and gain 2 energy. Once the damage is dealt, John passes. Tom plays an Island and a Dreamborn Muse, followed by an attack with Ojurta on Extra, before letting him have the turn. On Extra's upkeep, Dreamborn Muse triggers, making him mill 4 cards. He then casts Buried in the Gardens, enchanting Rootbound Crag, triggering Enchantress to draw, and itself to exile Tom's commander. He finishes off his turn with a tapped Jungle Shrine, and goes to his end step, where Sam awaits with his Bobblehead activation rolling a 5, which triggers Mr. House to make a 3/3 robot. Sam first mills 6 to Muse, followed by a singular mill to Radiation. He then misses his land drop and casts Jan Jansen, Chaos Crafter, before attacking Extra with a robot and passing the turn. John mills 5 to Muse, plays a Needlewurge Pathway for turn, and goes to combat, attacking Extra with Eradicator, which triggers, exiling the top card and making 2 energy. In the second main phase, he casts Robo-Brain Warmind, making another 2 energy, and passes. Tom mills for the Muse, then casts Tattoo Farmer. He immediately activates his effect to return Shipwreck Marsh into play tap, which triggers Farmer, giving Tom 2 rad counters. He then activates Elixir on Farmer, once again using his effect, this time on a swamp. This again triggers Farmer, giving Tom 2 more rad counters. Lastly, he casts Vexing Radgul and attacks Extra with Ojurta. With all that done, he passes the turn to Extra. Extra mills for the Muse, then plays a Crack Crown Pathway for turn. He then casts Bigger on the Inside on said Crack Crown, triggering Enchantress to draw. He then uses the newly enchanted land to cast his commander, Preston Garvey, Minuteman, which cascades into a Citizen champion. Extra then goes to combat, triggering Preston to enchant Promenade, and triggering Champion to gain a +1/+1 counter and draw. In his end step, Sam uses Jensen to sacrifice his robot, making 2 treasures, and activates Mr. House to roll 3 times, gaining a 5, which makes a robot, followed by 2 ones. Slightly disappointed, he goes to his turn. Sam mills 6 to Muse, followed by a singular mill to Radiation. He then casts Reckless Fireweaver and attacks Tom with his robot. On Sam's end step, John activates Marvel using 6 energy to cast Mystic Forge. Before going to his turn, John mills for the Muse, then casts Unwinding Clock from the top of his deck. He goes to combat, attacking Tom with Eradicator, triggering its effect to get 2 energy. In his second main, he plays an Elegant Parlor tapped, using its effect to surveil a card to the graveyard, and passes the turn to Tom. Tom mills 3 to Muse, followed by milling 4 to Radiation, losing 3 life and 3 rad counters. He then casts his commander, the Master, Transcendent, again giving Sam 2 rad counters. He immediately activates Master on Ruin Crab, followed by a Farmer activation on Sack of Triumph, which triggers both Farmer on Tom and Crab to mill 3. Lastly, he untaps Farmer with Elixir and passes the turn. Extra mills 5 to Muse, then plays a Forest for turn, followed by Chishiro, the Shattered Blade, which cascades into a Kadama's Reach, finding 2 forests, one of which enters tapped. He then casts Satyr Enchanter, and before being able to go to combat, John casts Dispatch on Preston, exiling him and making Extra cast him again. Preston then triggers at the start of combat, enchanting the forest, triggering both Champion and Shishiro to make a 2/2 Spirit. In his end step, Sam uses Jensen to sacrifice his robot, making 2 treasures, and triggering Fireweaver to deal 2 damage to each opponent, followed by an activation of Mr. House, rolling a 3 and a 4, making 1 robot, and dealing an additional 1 with Fireweaver. Sam mills 6 to Muse, followed by milling 3 to Radiation, losing 1 life and a rad counter. He then simply casts a Night Shift of the Living Dead, and passes. John mills 3 to Muse, then casts Elder Owen Lyons, returning Decoction module from his graveyard to his hand. He then casts the added Decoction module and goes to combat, attacking Tom with Eradicator, once again making 2 energy. Tom blocks with his Farmer, and in his second main phase, John activates Marvel, paying 6 energy to cast Aether Storm Rock, triggering both Module and Rock to make 2 energy. He then plays a Plains, and on his end step, Tom activates his Farmer, returning a Darkar Waste from John's graveyard, triggering Farmer on Tom, and Crab to mill 3. Tom mills 4 to the Muse, then triggers Radiation to mill 5, losing 3 life and 3 rad counters. He then activates Farmer, returning a Forest tap, triggering Crab to mill 3. Next he casts Raoul, Troubleshooter, which lets him cast Seedmore Muse from his graveyard. He then activates Master, returning Eternal Witness as a 3/3, and triggering its effect to return Beast Within to his hand. He then passes the turn to Extra. Extra mills 5 to Muse, plays Canopy Vista for turn, then casts Jenna, Red 2 Regent, which cascades into a Spirit Mantle, enchanting Preston. This triggers Mesa and Satyr to draw 2, followed by Champion and Chishiro. He then casts Dogmeat, Ever Loyal, milling 5, and returning Mantle of the Ancients to his hand, and casting it on Preston. Returning Rancor, Ancestral Mask, Sage's Reverie, and Almost Perfect attached to Preston. This triggers Reverie to draw 11, which should have been 6, Chishiro 6 times, which should have been 5, and Champion 6 times, which again should have been 5. Before going to combat, Tom activates Farmer, returning extra Spectator Seating, and triggering Crab to mill 3. Once that is done, Sam activates Jensen, sacrificing a robot, to make 2 treasures, and trigger Fireweaver 2 times. Sam then casts Path to Exile on Preston, making sure he's kept in check. After losing his suited up commander, Extra casts Ethereal Armor on Chishiro, triggering Mesa, Satyr, champion, and Shushiro himself, followed by wild growth on his forest, triggering his creatures once again. With his Voltron banished and an army established, he passes. Sam mills 5 to Muse, followed by milling 2 to Radiation, losing 2 life and 2 rad counters. He plays a Tainted Field for turn, and casts Barbarian class to end his turn. On his end step, Tom activates Referral, making everyone mill 1, followed by 2 farmer activations thanks to Elixir, returning 2 lands, and milling each opponent for 6 with Crab. John mills 2 to Muse, then casts Dr. Madison Lee, which triggers Module and Rock to make 2 energy. He then casts Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, and activates her to make his clock a copy of Great Furnace. He then casts Talisman of Creativity, triggering Saheeli to make a servo, again triggering Module and Rock. Next is the activation of Marvel that finds a Mind Stone, again triggering Saheeli, Module, and Rock. With his mana spent, he now goes to attack Sam with Eradicator, making 2 energy with his trigger. The attack is blocked by Mr. House, and on his end step, Tom again uses Referral and Farmer twice to mill all opponents for 7 and himself for 1, followed by Master adding a 3/3 Earth Cult Elemental to his board. Tom mills 5 to Muse, followed by milling 2 to Radiation, losing 2 life and 2 rad counters. He plays a Drowned Catacombs for turn, triggering Crab to mill 3. He then activates Master to return his World Shaper as a 3/3, and then uses Beast Within on it in order to trigger his effect, and return 8 lands tapped from his graveyard. This, alongside returning a land with Farmer and a Referral activation, makes everybody's library count 0, and with a simple pass, Tom is made the winner.